Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the thick of it. We're looking at what happens right after a major natural disaster hits, specifically the enormous challenges around getting aid where it needs to go, and importantly, hearing from local leadership actually on the ground.
Yeah, our main source for this deep dive is this, well, incredibly powerful interview excerpt. It's called San Juan Mayor Lets Slip, SHOCK admission on live TV video.mp3. And it features San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz. It's really raw. It gives you a real sense of a city just fighting to survive.
Absolutely. And our mission here really is to unpack what the mayor is saying directly. We want to understand the complexities of responding to a crisis from that ground level view and identify those big logistical problems she points out and maybe think about the bigger picture, the implications she raises. It's about the real impact, the human side and the system side. Okay, so you're ready. Let's jump into Mayor Cruz's insights and figure out what really goes on when things get this bad. So Mayor Cruz, she makes it absolutely clear, doesn't she? Right away, the goal is just one thing, saving lives. Nothing else matters as much. And she says, any dialogue, any conversation, it has to produce results. It's about action, not just talk. What was she actually seeing that made that so urgent?
Well, it's pretty stark when you hear it. Mayors like her were actually being told by supply depots, call back in a few days. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
In that situation. And then people needing FEMA help were told to register online.
Online. But she said there was hardly any internet, right? Even in San Juan.
Exactly. Very little internet, she said. And that right there shows you a huge problem, doesn't it? These centralized aid plans, they just don't account for the fact that disaster itself breaks the infrastructure you need to access the aid. It's a total disconnect. Creates impossible hurdles for the people who need help the most.
That's
Yeah, incredible. And she wasn't just blaming people, was she? She talked about the FEMA folks having good heart, wanting to do the right thing. But the core issue, she said, was they just don't have the resources. So it sounds like it was more about capacity than willingness.
precisely. And crucially, this wasn't just her saying it. It wasn't just her opinion. General Buchanan, the three-star general, brought in to manage the situation. He apparently said the same thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that we just don't have the resources for the kind of logistical muscle they needed right then in San Juan and, well, across Puerto Rico. Which makes you ask, right? What happens when the official response just isn't big enough for the disaster right from the start? Seems like a major miscalculation somewhere higher up.
Mm. And while all this was happening, or maybe not happening, the communities themselves were actually doing amazing things. She mentioned people clearing streets, these community kitchens popping up everywhere, getting tons of donations straight from people. That kind of grassroots strength is amazing. It really is. But then you compare that to the official support, it highlights the gap you mentioned.
How bad was the gap? Like, what was the actual official aid looking like?
Well, okay, get this. On one particular Thursday, FEMA delivered aid to San Juan. Remember, this is the capital city. 350,000 people. They received 3 pallets of water, 4 pallets of food, and 4 pallets of baby supplies. That's it.
3 pallets of water, 4 of food for the whole city.
For the whole city. The difference between that trickle and the huge local effort, well, it's kind of shocking, really shows how disconnected the distribution was.
Wow. Oh, the thing that really jumped out at me from her account, she got that aid, those few pallets, and she gave it all away. She gave it to the mayor of another town, Kio. Why? What does that tell us?
It tells you everything about the desperation, really. The mayor of Kio had gone to the main FEMA center and was basically told, come back Monday, we have nothing for you now.
Wait until Monday. Good grief.
Exactly. So Mayor Cruz giving away San Juan's tiny share. It wasn't just being nice. It was like this impossible choice, trying to plug a massive hole somewhere else because the system wasn't working. It just shows how bad the bottleneck was and the human cost when the supply chain breaks down that badly. Local leaders forced to make these awful choices with resources that weren't even enough for them.
And she knew it wasn't enough. She said that aid for San Juan's huge population, maybe half needing help, it was not even going to provide for a dent. Which brings it back to our main point, right? They didn't just need some aid. They needed a sustained flow, a real supply chain.
Okay, so Mayor Cruz is being very vocal. She's taking direct action. And then she gets this criticism. The president's FEMA director suggests she's not really plugged in, that she needs to, quote, get plugged into what's going on. What's behind that? And how did she respond? Well, it points to a huge communication breakdown, doesn't it? Maybe even some defensiveness. Because her response was, well, very specific. She said, look, I got a call from the White House on Thursday. Mr. Bozard, she called him, very action-prone. And being the capital, the biggest city, San Juan had official liaisons, a FEMA coordinator, two specific people assigned just to the city. She had direct links.
So she was plugged in, according to her.
That's what she laid out. She said she was physically at the FEMA location, the Marriott, just a couple of days afterwards, communicating the whole time. Plus, she said people from her team had been to the JFO, the Joint Field Office. That's like the main hub where everyone is supposed to coordinate.
Right.
So yeah, it suggests a real disconnect between maybe how things looked from Washington or how they were being perceived and the actual coordination happening or attempting to happen on the island.
Despite all that friction, that accusation,
Hmm.
she still said she'd meet with the president if he asked. She said anything that can be done and anyone that can listen is welcome.
Seems like she was just desperate for solutions, whatever it took. Absolutely. A real plea. And she had two key things she wanted to say if she got that meeting. First, simple but crucial, we have to cut the red tape, pointing right at the bureaucracy slowing things down.
And the second.
The second one was huge. Let us not talk about the debt. Let us not talk about the cost of reconstruction. Just put that aside for now.
Wow. Prioritize lives completely.
Completely. That was her absolute focus.
Yeah, and she really spelled that out, didn't she? Let's just talk about saving lives right now.
Yeah.
And she connected it to recovery, too, saying, get the power grid back as soon as we can because that has an immediate effect on our ability to recover financially.
It's a powerful point. Life first, then rebuilding. And the power grid is key to both. But she was worried, wasn't she? She voiced this real concern that the debt, Puerto Rico's debt, certainly seemed like it was getting in the way of getting help, based on things being said by the White House.
That the debt was somehow a factor in the aid response.
That seemed to be her fear, particularly for the long term. Which raises a really tough question, you know? How much do these pre-existing financial issues, like massive debt, affect how quickly and how generously help arrives when lives are literally on the line?
And her answer to that potential conflict was just completely unambiguous.
Utterly. She said, you put the people above the dead. You put lives and avoiding deaths above the dead. Just a clear moral line in the sand.
And she framed it based on her own experiences, didn't she? Her time living in the U.S.
Yeah, that was fascinating context. She reminded people she lived in the States for 12 years, went to the U, got her master's at Carnegie Mellon, worked for the U.S. federal government, worked in the private sector there. She said she knows the good heart of the American people.
And that they respond to emergencies.
Exactly. That when a Mayday sound goes off, they come to the rescue. She truly believed that based on her experience.
And she even pointed to examples like U.S. aid going to Haiti or Africa.
Right. Basically making the case if the U.S. does this for other countries in crisis.
Then why not for its own citizens?
Precisely. And that was her closing point on that. Puerto Rico, she said, is a Caribbean nation that has 3.5 million U.S. citizens, emphasizing that connection, that citizenship, implying, you know, a responsibility.
So wrapping this up, what are the big takeaways from really diving into Mayor Cruz's perspective here? We've heard about the immediate reality, the logistical failures, her insistence on leaves over finances. It's definitely a stark picture. Real difference between that view from the ground and maybe the view from further away.
It really forces you to think, doesn't it, about just how incredibly complex disaster response is, that tension between immediate human need and these longer-term financial things, and communication, or the lack of it, how vital clear coordination is between all the different levels of government. It makes you ask, you know, who gets to decide what success looks like after a disaster? And are those definitions actually focused on the most urgent needs?
Yeah, definitely a lot to think about there. Well, here's one last thought for you to chew on as we finish. How do those different ways of measuring success, you know, counting lives saved versus counting the financial cost, how does that actually shape the response we see both from the public and politically? And what are the hidden consequences, maybe the long-term impacts on trust and recovery, when one of those metrics seems to overshadow the other right in the middle of the crisis?